welcome, Ziyad. I got to meet you at the Flux Fest, which has nothing to do with Flux Schnell, but this amazing event that they have been going on for a while here in the Flux team here in Los Angeles. But that was such a cool experience, and I hope they do it again here in LA. But I got to meet you there last year, and then I was very fortunate. I think our friend Stephen Gibler at USC invited some of us to participate in this really interesting thing that Mozilla led off the top of this year, really starting to investigate and explore conversations about AI and creativity in Hollywood. So I feel very lucky to have been a part of this and to getting to learn how you think and how Mozilla thinks. But I'm excited for everybody to meet you. I'd love them to hear about you, and your resume is incredible. I love the layers of thinking you've brought to so many things, but now to know that you're bringing that to the work you're doing with Mozilla and this space. I'm excited for everybody to meet you, and I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brett. Yeah, and now I'm remembering Flux was when we actually first met. That's fantastic, and I'm hoping that they do it next year because it was such an amazing event. I've been in talks with them to try see if we can help that along. But yeah, just to give everybody an introduction to myself. Firstly, to say amazing to be here. This is such a cool group of folk that I've been following in all the different bits and parts since kind of it has started. And just so you know, somebody in the group, I'm not sure if Michelle is here, but like texted me last night being like, hey, I saw your name on this event. And Michelle is someone who acted in a studio doc that I did 10 years ago. And we had last talked 10 years ago when I was, at New York Film Academy, etc. So I've done a bunch of different things if you look at my resume, and that is because I'm just a very curious person and I think in systems. And that's how I just love operating. What I do at Mozilla is I run a very new program for us called Creative Futures, which sits at the intersection of art and tech, with the very specific premise that we need to build a world where the folk who are imagining, who are thinking creatively, are directing the shape of tech. And so that's in a nutshell what that is about. And the reason why that's so important to me personally and to us is because if you know a little bit about the history of Mozilla and Firefox, the browser wars of like the early 2000s, late 1990s, etc. Open source is our thing, right? Making sure that what is developed is openly available, publicly accessible, and folk can use and reuse. But to get to that point, to have that in the society in which we live, you need to have open fields of thinking, critical thought. You need to promote imagination as a core value. It's when we have closed forms of thinking, when we have static ideas of what our future should look like, that we end up in situations where we have proprietary walled gardens around things. And so Mozilla's really investments are to make sure that people can think freely, can imagine freely, and that artists are put at the helm of new tech development. And it's for those reasons, and I love it. And just to give you an indication, and I'll talk a little bit about the work that we did this year, Fred was involved, etc. To give you an indication of why this is personally important, I'm sure everyone in this call has experienced this in some other fashion. When we did this work with the Hollywood community this year, folk came up to me afterwards and they were like, very skeptical. They were like, okay, what are you doing with this? And what are you getting out of this? Like, are you building a product? Like what is happening? And we had to have like a bunch of meetings to be able to mount a response, to be able to communicate effectively that we're not looking to do anything. We're literally looking to do exactly what I mentioned, which is to promote and make sure imagination is open and communities develop around this work. And I think I'm based in LA, and I'm obviously in and around the industry. I think we're so used to forms of extraction as being like the currency of how things work. There's always like a quid pro quo behind every interaction that we have. And it's especially more acute now as we see this convergence of very real, kind of long in the making, but very real convergence of tech and media industry. And Hollywood is like ground zero for it right now. To see that kind of quid pro quo play out, it's all of us have like our guard up for when something new emerges, like what is being expected from me in exchange for participating in this event or doing this thing. So it's hard to be able to like with ease be able to communicate to folk. No, we just kind of want to build a community and advocate for open society, open development, and support the work that you do, because everyone thinks that there needs to be some sort of extraction. And it's sad that we live in an economy and a society that kind of prioritizes that. So that's a little bit of a deep dive into how I think about things, what I've been doing at Mozilla. And then specifically this year, the project that I just mentioned was designed to do just that. So what we did was we partnered with a think tank called the Berggruen Institute, and we brought together over this course of 5 assemblies, participatory gatherings, a suite of folk, anywhere from a studio executive to an independent to folk who are looking for work in different fields, from music to film, TV to content creation, to discuss not AI per se, but what creativity meant. And that kind of raw energy that I think drives everybody on this call. What does it mean to be creative? How do we have unstructured thinking around the meaning of creativity? Because that is actually what is worth protecting, worth elevating, worth responding to when we talk about AI. Like that raw, unstructured thinking, that space for imagination, is so much more powerful than having a focus group and asking people what they think about AI, right? That happens all the time. But actually getting to the nitty gritty of like what people care about, what does creativity mean in kind of this weird and wonderful imaginative ways, it allowed us to synthesize and say, this is what a particular community came together and said is important to them. From that, we developed a set of principles, or we'll call them design rules. And I think I'll drop the link in the chat here, because it just went live about 2 weeks ago. And they're design principles that are just based on what people had said to us, like what came up over and over about how people felt creativity was explored in the way that they do their work, or they see their work, etc. And these are Hollywood's 8 rules for AI, and they include things from build for process, not just output, protect lineage, give credit, keep friction in the creative flow, value deliberate slowness and depth, design for the whole creative ecosystem, make sure that you're accounting for labor, IP, make AI transparent and conversational, and put human purpose at the center. So these are principles that are, they're not specific kind of, here's an advocacy point of view, or here's a technical principle, right? But what it is it says to folk, hey, I built a system, I built a tool. Did what I build actually conform to this? Because if not, this particular community, this Hollywood community, and their expression of what creativity means, it means that it's probably running afoul if it doesn't actually hit all of these markers. And so we put that out, and it is a way of returning agency back to creative communities to say, we have a say on how things ought to be developed. And from that work, what we did, and also put this in the chat, is we explicitly said to folk in the Bay Area, we were like, hey, here is, and they're super cool, but we said, here are the principles. Run a residency with creative technologists and use these principles and prototype things. So that's currently underway right now, all open source. But the idea then is, this community not only just sat down and thought together and formed bonds with each other, that, they remain very engaged. We're constantly talking about AI stuff via email and a WhatsApp group. But they actually are responsible for new prototypes into the world because of the collective intelligence and feedback that they provided. So it was a very cool project. It was an experiment for us as Mozilla, but it was for the reasons that I think we mentioned. We've noticed that there's a lot, Hollywood is ground zero for so many social shifts and developments that are also playing out in different cities. And so we're going to do this work in different places. But we started off with in Hollywood because we saw this real convergence between media and tech, and are concerned and remain concerned, and I'm concerned about our ability to imagine and think freely. And at the same time, super excited about the possibilities that communities like this are developing to do just that. So I'm not a pessimist in this regard. I'm not necessarily an optimist. I'm like a realist, but I'm one who has like hell bent on making sure that we are developing things in a way that actually gives the communities most affected the power to be able to shape that. So that's in a nutshell, like what I've devoted my time to, what I'm doing. And as I mentioned, we're taking this to other places. We're going to do some more work in Hollywood next year. We're going to Bollywood next year as well. We're going to merge those communities together so that there's this productive exchange. And I think it's just all fun. It's all exciting, and it gives me a special kind of joy to see this work shape up, and to be so collaborative with folk in the industry in a way that is very different to how I've experienced it in the past. So that's my monologue on
It's
the
a good
work.
one. I mean, I can't help but think people might have opinions, thoughts on even just these 8 rules. Rules sound so scary, like the rules. Am I getting in trouble for not doing? But I wonder. I suspect that this is really recommendations and strong feelings that come out of a lot of discussion. If anybody has thoughts on these, please raise your hands and jump in. But I mean, I'll just jump in. I mean, which one of these do you think is most actionable right now? Like in terms of and if these things are meant to be like solutions to problems, like when you look at this list,
Yeah.
what are things that maybe you personally feel that you connected with?
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is that like this emerged from the kind of, and we have all the transcripts anonymized, et cetera, because Mozilla, but we have all the transcript, the recordings of what folks said. And then we really spend a lot of time synthesizing what are the things that came up over and over for what is important to people. So it doesn't, these rules or recommendations don't read as a kind of, as a, like tech folk need to do this. This is exactly what we want in IP. It should be read very specifically, which is like, if you want to enable the conditions for creativity using tools, these are some of the things that you need to think about. And this is what a particular community told us about it. Of this list, some of the things that have come up, I would say, in policy and advocacy areas already are about friction in particular. A lot of folk mentioned the need for adding areas of productive friction into how we engage with tools and systems so that we're not kind of becoming overly dependent or, in an ecosystem where we're giving a lot of our creative or decision-making power over to microtransactions or to frictionless systems that kind of like erode our ability to have agency over a particular task within creatively. And that was particularly acute. It was like, I feel like, okay, when I use an AI system, it's just too easy. I get lazy. I get creatively lazy. Or my autonomy becomes affected in particular ways. So that's one that has come up before. It was interesting, obviously, then to see it come up again. Ones that I thought were quite very interesting was the encourage randomness and glitchiness. It's related to that, but it's also a sense of like, yeah, creativity is all about like that, go outside and I don't know, you get hit by an apple, whatever, that happened to Newton and you have an idea, right? And where are the spaces for those ideas if you're constantly glued into your screen or in a system that has very overdetermined ways of working, right? So what are the spaces in which a system or platform challenges you to actually have the Apple moment? And not Apple in the big A, but in the little A moment, right? Where you have those sparks of creativity. So how do you be random? The world becomes overdetermined in particular ways. How do you actually be random? And then I also want to point out, like, thinking about the whole creative ecosystem, right? We often think, and this is acute for a lot of the computer scientists that I've worked with, even internally, like, we are a tech company as well. We're the foundation that owns the corporation that makes the browser. We have a lot of tech folk in our midst as well. Is that sometimes we're designing to solve a problem or to offer a benefit, but we're not thinking about like the downstream or upstream effects of that. We're not thinking about labor. It's not some computer science engineer's job to think about the labor implications of the tool that they're going to build, right? But here's an exact prompt for them to do so, to think, okay, well, I'm being asked to do X, Y, Z, but what if I actually had that consideration in the back of my mind? How would I design differently? I thought about labor implications, or instead of solving for efficiency or optimization, I have a broader set of variables that I'm optimizing or solving for than what I'd initially started with. So those are the kinds of things that I think are are maybe actionable, or at least that I wanted to highlight and pull from this.
I love it because you've used the word design a lot. And I think it's something that I try to remind myself and a lot of people I work with, that this isn't done. Like whatever this is, like we're in a stage of interacting with what it can be and what it should be. And by that, I mean, what kind of an industry comes out of this? What kind of creative processes come out of this? What do companies look like? So I think this idea of like, how do you approach that opportunity to sort of lean into like, how can we make something better? It also reminds me a lot of, some people might get the reference, like the Brian Eno, like David Bowie's producer. He had his oblique strategies, which I think came from a more pure like art school brain. But it is interesting, some of these things of like, it's almost like as you approach something, here's some things to try that might make it more interesting. I see Larry's got his hand up.
Yes.
What was your question there?
Yes. Good morning. How's it going? Uh, Question. Can you elaborate on the protect lineage and give credits? Can you elaborate on that section?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we know that this battle is kind of like flying off the shelf right now about copyright, protection of artists' work, etc. So it speaks to that. It speaks to an innate need to have work recognized, and attributed. And so that came up a lot in these conversations with in these assemblies. It's like, how do you design tools or systems that actually give attribution or credit to what they've been trained on or developed on, in ways that are upstream and both downstream recognizable, and that includes the conversation on IP, but it's broader than that. It's like attribution is much broader than just intellectual property, and or interrelated but distinct. It's there are histories, not just individuals. There are community histories of how we got to where we are in AI, right? That community histories are actually what are powering AI development in particular. It's like we're seeing the synthesis of like human knowledge being kind of refracted back to us in through these systems, and they ought to acknowledge that. And so that came up quite a lot. How do we do that? And I want to point out that we've found attribution. If you think of Creative Commons licenses, or you think of like licensing attributions, we have mechanisms already in place that show kind of the provenance of where works come from, or how a chain of title, for example, in a movie, like when your production lawyers are sitting down, they're looking at where everything came from. It's like, why are we not doing that when we are working with these tools and acknowledging everything that goes into it? Being more attributive rather than less is the aim here. It's like, we are not individual creators, we are communities of creativity, and that's what's important.
Good question. I'm mindful of time because we're moving to Katya, but Michael Runnan asked a not small question, but maybe it's he said, how would you advise we build machine cinema like Mozilla org as an open mission driven, community powered and built to scale? But in 3 minutes, go.
Well, that's a funny question, because like I was like, we've had conversations. I was like, we need to learn from you, actually. So I'll say, like, the hardcore community of Mozilla has always been the open source dev folk that started it out with Netscape through Firefox. And that is still a core part of Mozilla Corporation and Firefox. And they're around and they're actively contributing and they're self-organized and they meet up with each other. And I think they're doing a lot of the things that you're doing. They're oriented around a set of principles, which is the Mozilla Manifesto, right? So there are a set of kind of structures in place that have made this community what it is. There's a manifesto, there's a project, which is Mozilla. Mozilla is a project. It's not a product. Firefox is just an offshoot of a project that comes out of a shared set of ideas and principles. So once you have those architectures in place, that makes it much easier for folk around the world to join, to be mission aligned, to join more of these calls, to start the chapters of their local versions of what this is, to feed that into kind of the different structures. That's how it's worked in the past with us. And then it was formalized through obviously the creation of Mozilla Foundation and Mozilla Corporation. And it's really a community of those folk. Our challenge right now is like, that is a community that is still very strong and historic, but how do we bring in new communities like Machine Cinema Club, How do we have differentiated communities that nevertheless talk to each other, that, we'll have a good time in Mozilla Festival, which is what, we put on a big festival every year. It's happening in Barcelona this year. So we actually look to folk. We're actually hiring a VP soon of community to actually design that function for us to bring us into the new age, because there's all sorts of new forms of community management and development. So I would say, like, I'm looking to this community because I think it's so successful already. Just the fact that how many people have joined, like, on a Wednesday morning. I know it's different times for different folk, but like there's almost 70 folk on this call. It's like amazing. It's a strength. A good community is something that's self-organizing. And so, it's amazing to see this work, because these are the right ingredients for how I've seen Mozilla develop as a community-led organization with a mission. And I know that there are other questions in the chat. I'm going to fire through them because I know you want to get
Oh,
through.
and sorry, I didn't mean to suddenly. I was more like, it was a big question, and you did a really good job of trying to answer it. No, I want to make sure everybody's questions get asked, and I think we're okay. I just, look, there's a lot of shared values. And first time I met you, and both Matt and I have had great conversations with you. Again, it's always like, let's just pick a thing and do it if we're figuring that out. But I think the advising us on, I think like what these rules for AI speak to on the creative industry called Hollywood, but there's so many of us here that are looking even beyond Hollywood. There's so many emergent, creative spheres that we all see impacting our careers and things that we're growing. But the idea that there's a human layer, call it the friction piece that you talked about. That was one of the things I talked about also in the think tank stuff. That's like, I think that's what I vibe with. I like that it slows down a little bit when we have to stop and hear each other. And I think the way that that's a value across what can be built and how to build it, I think that really speaks to me. A few people had a couple of questions. I don't know, does Mozilla have any creative AI tools? I think we were sort of talking about one, right? Yeah, there's something that is an open source.
Yeah.
Universe.
So I will say that, like, we had been on the kind of in 2020, we published a paper on trustworthy AI, but as you know, developing AI, especially as an open source provider, super expensive. So we rely on community devs to do these things. We don't have an exact suite of things. We've more integrated on the corporation side with the suite of providers to make sure that folk have choice amongst all the different AI providers. What I will say, and I am going to plug that in, is there's two really cool projects. One is a little bit downstream, which is Mozilla Common Voice. And that is I'm going to drop these links in the chat, is a super cool, I think it's the largest open source data voice donation database that has languages and voices from around the world. It basically protects the heritage of vernaculars and local languages. And that's a fun way to get involved with Mozilla, is to actually donate a voice. And that's a very strong community of folk. I would say like one of our strongest there. Folk in that Common Voice community of like they kind of like are their own thing, and they just love this work so much. And that's a good way to pivot to the next thing, which I think might be more relevant for this group of folk in particular, which is what we realized was big tech companies in particular, we will not mention names, but were using the corpus of Mozilla Common Voice to train their models, and we're not attributing or not compensating the community that were being that were upstream, and were contributing their voices to this corpus. So we developed, because we love to build things for our community. This is shipping this year, and I know Fred and co have already chatted to the team there, but Mozilla Data Collective. Mozilla Data Collective is a platform that is about consent, compensation, and control. It's basically a way and it was born out of the issues in Common Voice. Is a way for any person who contributes data, which includes artworks, includes the data, the audiovisual works that you put on the internet, through media, multimedia, and forms, to make sure that they have gated control over it. That if there's any downstream uses, you'd be compensated for it. You're able to control how it gets used, et cetera. And that's a direct response to what we saw in Common Voice. So that I would say is a creative platform and tool. But as for tools that creatives would use in their particular workflows, not currently. We don't offer, I'd love them to. I chatted to the Firefox folk and they were like, we'd love to be able to offer that functionality in Firefox, but not currently at the moment.
Copy that. I think we have time for one more question. Basha, your hand is patiently raised. Please jump in.
Hi, pleasure to meet you. My name is Basha. Actually, I also went to New York Film Academy. Okay, so I actually have a really, really big project, but it seems like you've already laid the foundation for it, which is what you just spoke about. But I just wanted to ask, is that only for audio or is it also for any kind of data, as in images, like representation of people and also representation of like works? For example, if somebody was a historian, it's good telling you about indigenous people, for example. And then do they all get compensated for everything that they offer? Is it like royalties based?
Yeah, exactly. You'll set how much your price essentially. And it does include different forms of media. So I know that I'm not on that team, but I know they're doing partnerships with local libraries, institutions, etc., who have all of their content out there in the wild, basically being exploited for purposes that they can't control. And this is a way of saying, you gate it on the platform essentially.
And this is global?
This is global. Yeah. We just launched it. I know there was a big push on speech and text data, but we sent out a call to our community as well to be like, if, audiovisual, et cetera, that is still something that it will definitely be supported, but the first call is for voice and text. The full platform, as it goes to alpha, will be for all multimedia. So I'm not sure of the status. I have to go and check like where it is right now, but I'm pretty sure you can start to dig around in there.
And is that
Okay,
how
well,
it's involved? How could we as Machine Cinema and what Vasha's doing could get involved as steps, I guess?
Yeah, I would say join the platform, figure it out, and provide feedback to the team, to be honest. Like, it's a community-led effort. So it's like you're joining a community to help build this thing. And obviously there are devs who are developing it, but like your feedback, your participation really matters because, as I said, it wasn't born out of like a desire to make a ton of money. It was born out of a real experience with what we saw in Common Voice, where folk were just not seeing their literal voices were being used in ways they didn't want them to. They didn't want to see them in places they didn't want, and were not being compensated. So I think joining the platform would be the first step. I know that they're sprinting to kind of get things out by the end of the year, but it's another one of the things that we did this year, where we were like, listen to community feedback and actually build something. So I'm not the best steward because I'm not on that team, but I'm the best connector to that team, and also to say that folk who are interested in joining the platform and uploading their works, and in a way that they feel safe and secure, I can vouch for that for sure, because I know that team and community is super, super tuned into that. We wouldn't have built it based off of Common Voice if it wasn't. So I can't speak to the exact sprint they're on, but I think you should be able to join.
Can I also ask about the PR around this? Because to me, a lot of the negative narrative around AI is the fact is how the data was gotten, right? Which basically it's stolen. But this is saying basically you're honestly sourcing this and ethically sourcing this to then license out to the people. You're licensing it out, right?
Yeah, it's more like a platform for folk to actually just take control of how they want their data shared. And it's you choose how you want to license it out, to be honest. It's not us doing that for you. We provide the architecture and the platform and the infrastructure for you to make those decisions about your data. The way it's described is like it's like a GitHub for data, to be honest.
Right.
That's really the aim behind it. And there are a number of other folk trying to, get into the space. Cloudflare has obviously added a layer on for crawling. There's the RSL license, etc. There's a number of different ways people are going about this. This is our solution.
Is Mozilla interested in doing a big PR and marketing campaign around this to sort of change the narrative around AI?
I can't speak for that team. But I mean, that's the general ambit of it, to be honest, which is, there has to be a better way to respect creators' rights. I think the interesting thing for this community is it's always been couched as data contributor rights, right? And so sometimes it can feel really technical and different for folk on this call. But actually, if you think, you should think of yourselves, and if you're working on the internet or online in some fashion as a data contributor, your works are if they're digitized and they're in some form online, you are a data contributor. So that team has been, very interested in kind to think through who everybody who's affected by this, which is a lot of people, a lot of different groups. And you will be hearing more and more about this as it gets closer to kind of official alpha. But at the moment, and as I discussed with Fred, and I know that he's chatted to that team, they're in partnerships mode to get people essentially using the platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Great question, Vasha. I want to pivot to Katya. Do you think we have time for one more question? There's just like an interesting last question that came in, or do you have to run at the hour?
Yeah, there's time for one more. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for being patient. This is like the real life drift of interesting questions. There's just one last question on the Common Voice from Artemis and Michelle. Do you want to get more deeply involved in endangered language preservation? Is that what some of this effort points towards?
Oh, 100%. Common Voice is so beautiful. Like just look it up, look at the articles that have been written about it. Like languages that no one has wanted to pay attention to and nobody cared about because, they just, large companies, governments are not looking at how to preserve languages in different countries or sometimes even in their own country. Communities in Common Voice actually stood up and they did that. And they did that at a time where it wasn't commercially viable. So this project has been going on for a while, and that community is building for a while, and no one could really see any like commercial value in it. And then AI hit, and people were like, "Oh, we need voice data, we need language data, we need to make sure that we are multilingual." And suddenly that corpus is just like exploded, and that's why you're seeing all of these shifts in us, because like we're like, "That's great. We took this bet on this community, and we developed this community for a different reason, for heritage preservation, for community building." And now Mozilla Data Collective is our kind of what we needed to build to make sure that community is protected, because yes, it is something that we care very much about. The endangered language, heritage language, vernaculars that you don't often hear, people's literal voices. Those are things that we wanted to preserve.
Amazing. So interesting. And I again, love seeing different motives and goals of how we drive big efforts. And it's such the open source mentality. When I first met you, I wanted to have just a whole podcast just on open source in general. I feel like you were educating me a lot on things that are allegedly open source, and you guys stick to the roots. But that is hopefully another time we get to invite you back. I think small. I know we do feel like a club, but we're hopefully bigger. I know we love Machine Cinema Club, but I think you've branded us Machine Cinema Club, which is funny. But I think it's all good. But love you joining us. Thank you for sharing time with us and teaching us about how you've been approaching this. And obviously so many people are instinctively saying, how can we jump in? So I hope we can, I don't know, we'll bring you into the WhatsApp. I'm always careful about people jumping into the fire hose, but you're very welcome inside of our WhatsApp group. And maybe people can thank you directly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll share some details in the chat. Obviously I won't disappear, and I'm interested obviously in the whole session here from Katya and co, but I'll drop some things in the chat to get involved. But just to note, this is new work for us as well. And so it's really important, but we're super excited. And I'm just personally I'm super excited. Like this is a cool shit. And I will get to work with people who really, really care. So thanks so much, folks.
It sounds like you just enlisted a whole bunch of people that want to work more with you. Thank you. Thanks for spending time. Katya, thank you for joining us today. I think I met you at AILA, I think last year but you were probably meeting a lot of people then. And I was really cool to see what you were doing then. And I think then your name just kept getting louder and louder with all this incredible stuff you're doing with Showrunner. And and Ed is such a quiet guy. Like it's hard to keep up with what he's up to. I'm glad you're here to help communicate on his behalf. Just the opposite. Ed is an incredible sort of voice box of energy and point of view. And he's provocative too. He likes to engage.
He's very provocative when he does speak. He says not even his mind, just whatever popped in there.
Yeah, I got to meet him at when Asteria had their like launch party, and everything he just kept saying. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we'll see where that goes. He loves shaking things up, and I think you guys are shaking things up. And obviously, you are at an interesting place in what some people call the Netflix of AI, which is just like a great word salad moment. Just it up. But I think that means a lot of things. I think you guys probably are also seeing what is Showrunner capable of. I think the first time I saw it was when you were sort of suddenly getting to see South Park just delivered before our eyes. I think you guys have refined it a lot since then.
Yeah, it's way better now.
Or just like what else it's really intending to do. But anyway, really excited for people to meet you, and hopefully you have some show and tell for us. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Katya Alexander. I'm the head of production at Fable Studio with Showrunner. For people who don't know what the platform is, it is basically a platform where we can make shows in a more traditional way, or even use shows that already exist. At this point, with their permission. In the past, we were just testing the technology. As Fred brought up the South Park episodes, also my cat's just having the time of his life back there. And so one of the things that we do is we take sort of a traditional media and we allow people to come in and remix it. And so that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like adding yourself into an episode or just creating more episodes. It could look like changing how a season ended and having your own version of where the season goes. It could look like digging into different characters and learning more things about the show and uncovering mysteries that are sort of planted throughout the show. It could look like making your own spin-off show about a very specific thing. An example I always give is if The Simpsons was on Showrunner, you could make an entire show about Moe's Bar if you wanted to. One of the big things about it is that we're not necessarily really interested in how AI can do things that already exist and just do them faster and cheaper and with less people. An example, like just uprooting an entire animation pipeline or an entire VFX pipeline is not as interesting as, being able to create something that never existed before. And people being able to make like extreme versions of fan fiction and their own versions of these shows is something that essentially could have never been done before. So we just reached our alpha, and on it we have two shows. We have Exit Valley, which is sort of a satire on Silicon Valley. And with that, you can sort of make fun of all of the big names out there like Elon Musk and Trump and all of those different people who have a really big hand in tech. We're like, well, we're going to use the tech to make fun of them then. Edward is on there too. You can make fun of Edward as a character, and he is a character on Exit Valley. And then the other
is he
one
in that
is,
picture? Is he one of the people in this picture?
I don't think so.
All right.
I think that there are like main characters, but technically he is a character. And then our other show that is on there already is Everything is Fine, which is sort of this wizardy, magical animated show about like relationship issues. And so right now you can go on and you can remix these shows. You can make your own episodes. You can also make your own shows on this platform. And we have a bunch of other shows in the pipeline being created. We have an actual season of Exit Valley being created in a more traditional way so that you can watch the season and get more ideas for remixing. We have a lot of shows in the pipeline. I think one of our biggest things that we're working on right now, which is some things I brought materials for, is we are also the company that is recreating the lost 44 minutes of Orson Welles' Magnificent Ambersons, which is basically Orson Welles made this film and then he went to another country to go make another film. And while he was out of the country, the studio took over, re-edited the entire movie, and burned all the film that they had cut from the movie. So when he came back to America, he couldn't put the footage back because they had burned it all and they had reshot pretty much the entire ending of the film. And so we are in the process of recreating that. So I will share my screen and
shout out to all the film school people that got the Magnificent Ambersons reference the first time, because that's relatively deep cut. I think even in film school, that's a very, very, very interesting, emblematic topic. And even the story of how he was on the wrong side of Hollywood and he's always a bit of a rebel. It's a very interesting avatar for this process.
Yeah, it was actually very funny because I kept calling it Fantastic Ambersons. Like finally I went to film school, but I can't get my words right, I guess. Yeah, I mean the film is incredible. I've seen both versions of it now, to a certain extent. So I want to show a little bit about what we're doing and what we already had and what we're able to sort of build off of. So one of the first things that we had was that we have a script that is the original version of this movie. And what's very interesting about really old scripts is that they're formatted in a very, very different way. But it ended up making it very helpful for us because it truly like broke down every single shot and exactly how long the shot is supposed to even remain on the screen, as well as we had Orson Welles's original storyboards for the movie. And this amazing guy, Brian, who has been working on this actually for 6 years, created an animatic of this movie. So we have sort of an animatic to go off of and work off of. These are some of the scenes that we're doing this weekend.
Wow. So obviously these are the gaps in the film that, and again, I'm going to get film school here for a second. Like this is the legend of Orson Welles getting snubbed by Hollywood. So part of your process is the document. You have the original script, I guess.
We have the original script. We have the original storyboards. We have pretty much all of his intended things. And then, as I mentioned before, Brian spent the past 6 years going through those storyboards and the script and recreating a second by second recreation of through animatic of what is supposed to be there. So we are our team is able to watch the film with these animatic portions and see how it was supposed to play out. And so I sort of broke this down into 4 quick phases of some of the testing that we're doing and some of the processes that we're using. So one of our big tests was the voice. We were going to have to be able to bring on actors and then clone their voices. And so this is like one of our voice cloning tests.
If we're supposed to hear it, I think you need to share it as a tab.
Oh, okay.
And it may be glitchy, and if you're, it might be the limits of Google Meet if you're trying to share.
No problem. Let me.
If that's a tab on Chrome, it'll work for sure. Otherwise, we might have to think about it differently.
Are you able to hear it now?
It might be because I'm sorry, everybody. We're using
Okay.
Google. I think Google might be limited, so you can only hear audio on tabs. Yeah.
That is totally fine. I'll just show the visual test that we've done because that's the only audio test that we have.
Yeah.
Everything else we've been doing is purely visual. And so
sorry,
other-
and I mean, just to describe what that's supposed to be, is that a character that's already in the movie?
yeah, so I mean, all the 44 minutes have characters that are obviously already in the movie. And so we've been able to have actors, and that was actually one of our tech people who was just trying to see if he could clone his own voice. But having actors sort of speaking and clone and making their voice sound exactly like the characters. And so we've been experimenting with accents and like how quickly you have to speak, how slowly you have to speak, how much you have to emphasize. Another test that we've been doing is sort of a motion to motion test. So this is our director. He just filmed himself in his bedroom.
He's got really high quality eyebrows for expressions. He's
Yeah.
got a very unfair advantage on his eyebrows.
It's the French in him. And so this was us turning him into that character. We've also been trying to take an animatic and turn it into an actual shot. So on the top, you'll see the animatic. On the bottom, you'll see a generated shot.
Mm.
So that was like kind of the first round of testing, doing some like slightly simpler tests. In phase 2, we actually had a white psych soundstage. I acted in it, the director acted in it. We also hired an actor for it. So we were able to do like some actual tests. So one of the things that we tested was shadow. We wanted to see how well the shadow could transfer onto a person. So within this image, we had people walk by, we had things cover the lights, and we tried to make sort of a harsher shadow on my face, because one of the big things about this film is that the cameras tend to be very still. So some of the ways that you know that another person's in the room is like the shadows on them. And we learned that the shadow doesn't transfer at all. So we were having to find other ways to sort of solve that problem. But one of the things that we did learn was that the motion and like the subtle movements of the face does transfer very well. This is another example. And this example was also very interesting because I tried to look very, sad and worried within this shot. And the actual shot that it created, she ended up looking super happy and lively. And so we're trying to figure out like what programs are the best to use and how do you make sure that
What's top of that list so far? I mean, some people like one animate, some people like Act 2. Are there
I
other ones?
don't know if we're allowed to share.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I don't know. I will share things if people ask privately.
What can you say what it rhymes with? I'm just kidding. And I love going deep on it, Magnificent. I'm just seeing a few questions pop up that might be freestyle, but I'm also happy to let you stay where you are. I just flagging a few. I can ask them for you. I just didn't know where you were on the Magnificent Ambersons piece and where this sits in the context of showrunner.
Yeah, I guess I'll get through this quickly and then
Please.
I can answer all of the questions. So this was like a side profile test that we did to make sure that because as within, the scene, obviously actors take on all these different positions. And this is sort of a little bit of one of the other things we discovered was that the eye line is extremely important. Like you really have to position everybody super correctly because then when you transfer the motion into the animatic, it doesn't work great. It just doesn't look right. They don't look like they're looking in the correct place. We had to start doing some like turnarounds of the characters using all of these different images we had of them from different points of view, because we're obviously creating a 3D space with these people and with acting. We want to allow them to have the full motion. And the last thing I'll say about this is we've been doing our last bit of testing, which has been kind of the most like impressive outcomes, I believe. A lot of these scenes, some of these scenes are moments within an actual scene. And the challenge of that is that it needs to be perfect because it needs to be seamlessly going in and out of almost the same shot. And you shouldn't be able to tell what's AI and what's not. But for the other scenes, one of the really, really difficult things is we don't have a reference for what that's supposed to look like, what the place is supposed to look like, what they're supposed to be wearing. So these are some tests that we've been doing in that world where we have the animatic, we have a screenshot of the animatic. We're able to make that into a photo-like image. And then we're able to add video to that photo-like image so that it becomes an actual realistic shot. And this is with two characters, and rain and all these other effects.
So this is effectively a totally missing scene, what we're seeing.
Yeah,
Like this, it's not even like this is a cutaway within a shot.
Right.
This is, and these actors were characters that were already in the movie. It's just that this is a
Yeah.
scene that they're out of.
yeah. So having to try to figure out like, okay, like what would they be wearing or what would they be doing? Like an example, one of the big arguments we've all been getting into is in the storyboard, there seems to be something on a character's lap. And in the storyboard, it comes out of nowhere. And so we're arguing like, is she sewing? Is she knitting? Like, is she just fiddling with a handkerchief? And depending on if she's living in a boarding house, so when she walks into the scene, should there be knitting on the chair? Like, would she have left her knitting on the chair in a boarding house? Would she have carried it into the room? And so like, these are like the extremely nitty gritty details that you don't really think of much about, but we have to think extremely deeply about, because obviously knitting can't come out of nowhere. We don't know if she's knitting or if she's sewing or if she's just fiddling with the handkerchief. But what we do know is that in the storyboard, she's holding something. And we want to try to stay as true to Orson Welles' vision as possible.
Super interesting. I mean, I guess in some questions that are coming up, I think this is, Jennifer, I think your question is it related to is it related to Magnificent Ambersons or Showrunner more broadly? The question about IP.
Both. Showrunner, in general, I've been spending a lot of time looking at the issues of responsible AI and IP and everything. And I know there was a lot of pushback from the Wells estate in terms of the work that you're doing on the film. So just wanted to understand what your approach to the IP licensing is. I know a lot of it's covered under the parody and satire exclusion, but just wanted to understand more about your position on that.
Yeah, of course. So we are talking to the Wells estate. But on the other side of it, if we don't commercialize it and if we don't sell the model that we specifically made for this specific film, if we don't sort of release it in a way to make money in any way, technically we are allowed to do this level of experiment. And a lot of what we've heard from specific people at the estate is that they're actually very excited that we're doing this. It's in terms of like getting the IP and being able to commercialize it, we're still in negotiations for that. We're still trying to figure that out with the overall estate. But in terms of it being specifically an experiment just to see if it's something that could be done, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about.
That's interesting. So it sounds like there's obviously an interest in what if this were re-released and everybody and their lawyers were probably well represented in what that turns into. But in terms of why you're doing this, it sounds like you've approached it with the benefit of like a true, call it artistic interest, technical interest. And it's its own story of what I'm curious, whose idea was it? Like, it's such a provocative thing to go after. Is that a classic Saatchi moment, or was it a team moment, or?
The classic Saatchi moment.
Classic. Yeah, it reads and it's keeps it interesting. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Again, if anybody's like this is like film history that glossed over them, it's a very interesting chapter. And I mentioned to Katya, for what it's worth, I actually know a doc filmmaker that has been in search of the lost prince, and apparently he's in post-production on some notion of this sort of in Brazil and might be hiding in some kind of warehouse somewhere.
Because he was in Brazil. That's where he was filming. He was in Brazil. But one thing I do think about is if he did have the prints in Brazil, he probably would have made the film back to what he was supposed to be.
Again, this is one of the classic, one of the best like film history kind of little like, legends. Again, it's supposedly the print played somewhere, and to the extent that he saw it, he must have seen his print of here's the version of the film he wanted. Or at least that's how I remember it. Sorry, now I'm going to get pop quizzed by a proper film history professor on this call. Another question that came up was, now we're back to Showrunner, I think. Does the platform allow you to just upload finished content, or does it also offer tools to create content?
It only offers tools to create content. Technically, like the content that you're creating is shared within all the other members of the platform. But at the moment, it's something we're working on, but at the moment, we aren't necessarily a streaming service. We are actually mostly a content creation service.
Fascinating. So the Netflix of AI is to come. That's just, or was that another ad? Actually, did he plant that in the report?
No, the article, I think the journalist did.
Got it. Okay. Or they just,
I don't think that one was us, because when we read that for the first time, we were like, interesting.
I think they just fed off the ed energy on that one. They love it. Like, how do I out ed? What another one from Michelle? Can we upload our performances to the platform like the director did to achieve more exact performances in Showrunner?
Not necessarily within Showrunner. I think that might be something we're like trying to figure out. So within Showrunner on the specific platform, one of the things that you are able to do is when you generate sort of a clip, you can go into the script and you can go in and you can like edit the script in terms of like what emotion they should be saying, align with, and what shot should be happening when that line happens. You can edit the specific line and specifically what they say. So you can go in and you can create things in that way.
Super interesting. I mean, look at it, provocativeness aside. I mean, I think there's so much to pay attention to in the space. We do our best with these weekly calls and what we talk about. I got excited seeing what Showrunner is doing. I mean, I think there should be 100 more of these. And by that, I mean, just people saying, what if, and what else can we do? And it's so exciting to see people really like looking beyond the existing business models and formats. And it's great to see real support in the investor community. I mean, where do you guys, I mean, it's funny, like great products often start in one place, but then sort of evolve. But I wonder, and I suspect some of these things are it's your own business. So you tell me whatever you want, but I guess, what do you think about the way all this is shaping up, whether it's the context of the creator economy that is so beyond what AI is doing, just what's already happening with YouTube and social video. Where do you guys sort of see yourself, and what do you get excited about? Which trends do you feel like you're responding to when you create something like Showrunner?
I know for myself, like I'm very excited about creators just having any platform, have that be YouTube, because there are so many amazing shows that are created and founded on YouTube, where I do think, I have been an indie producer in this industry for 10 years, and there is a lot of gatekeeping, which I know a lot of people have been talking about, especially within AI, but something that I would like to say about that is a lot of the people that are bringing that up don't necessarily want the gate to collapse. They just want to be the ones to hold the keys to it. So we really just want the gate to actually collapse and to allow people to be able to make the things that they want to make. Now, on the flip side, as I mentioned earlier, we don't necessarily have interest of like, how do you make a movie faster and cheaper and with less people? And how do you make an animated thing faster and cheaper and with less people? And how do you make VFX faster and cheaper and with less people? Because a lot of those industries already exist. And I think if the tools are really good, then the people in those industries are going to use the tools, and they might not. And one of the big things I've discovered in AI is you can have some of the greatest tools in the world. I promise you, a director doesn't want to sit in their basement and make a movie by themselves. They might do it once, they might do it twice, just to get their name out there. And then they're going to go, give me my crew. Like, now I want my costume designer and my production designer, and I want to do this in a big way. And I've seen it time and time again where it's like, there's a sound design tool and people are pitching it as if you can sound design your own movie. But what I've really found is that it's just sound designers are using that tool because no director wants to sound design their own movie. And like, same thing with the VFX. And so one of our big things at Showrunner is like, we don't want to become a VFX house or like an animation production house. We don't want to do that. There are better animation production houses out there that are hiring people and are making amazing work with amazing talent. And that's just not what we do. We wanted to see AI as beyond what we already have. Like, we should be using AI to do things that would have otherwise been possible instead of, just replacing people en masse.
Of that, I have two, obviously, if folks have questions, please raise your hands. I mean, I have two questions. One, like there's something inherently interactive and participatory about what's happening with Showrunner. I love those adjectives. What do you think of Sora 2? Like in terms of just without, I don't know if you consider competitors, I'm just saying in terms of another thing in the landscape right now that I think we've been talking about this last couple of weeks, like is the remix culture that's implied by the cameoing. Like, how do you see this trend? Again, I think you guys have a foot in that door, or whatever metaphor I'm looking for. But you guys are speaking that language of like, how does the viewer take part in there? Like, how do you react to what Sora 2 is doing?
With Sora 2, I think one of my initial like icky feelings about it is they don't have permission. They sort of just made that where like the things on the Showrunner platform are either original from us or we are licensing it, and the creators want their show to be on the platform. That's why it's on the platform. And so it did give me, as an idea, I'm like, oh, such a great idea. But in the way they executed it, it did give me a little bit of a bad feeling because, people did make that art and they own that art and they should own that art. But what it does show is that there is a massive culture of remix, and there is a massive culture of people wanting to not just watch their media, but interact with their media. And there's just been a really big conversation about Gen Z and like, how do you get Gen Z to engage with media? Because sort of Gen Z is the major, group that people are losing. Gen Z and Gen A, like, they're not interested in what people are making. My sister's 17. Oh, we run everything by her. And like, I'm noticing that young people are more interested in interacting with something and being able to do something with that content instead of just passively watching.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. And I'm hoping that my 4 and 8-year-old are my secret weapons as they get older.
They will be.
It's not meant to be relevant. Adam Muchner, your hands up. What do you got?
Yeah, I've just got a quick question, and maybe you said it earlier, but I was wondering what sort of, what is the suite of tools that you really have access to sort of build, the version 1 of the story outside of, and that the co-creators and remix really have access to behind the scenes in Showrunner? Is there sort of a wide array of so private APIs to things, or I'm just interested in that question. I wasn't sure if you got into that.
Yeah. So when it comes to a creator that is coming on to make a show with us, we allow them to make the show how they want to. So if they want to use a fully team of traditional animators, power to them. They do have to make the lines and they have to stay on budget, but power to them. Like, I would love that. And if they want to only use AI tools, it's truly up to the creator. It's not up to us. We're there to help them get their show all the way through to the end of the finish line, but they are sort of the captain of that ship in terms of how they want to do it. And that also goes with tools. We do have a set of tools on our end that power Showrunner that allow us to create some stuff for them when they might need that, like some extra characters or some scenery. But in the initial stages, we do have them like working with people to figure out like what the look of the show is going to be and what's the feel of the show is going to be. So it really ranges from project to project, from all the way to traditional, just a mostly traditional process, all the way to some of the most like unhinged I don't even know how to describe it. I've ever seen. That is being done by Paul Trillo, which you could imagine. You could only imagine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to kind of follow up. So with the people who are remixing, what are their
Oh, with remix. Oh, sorry. So on the actual platform, sort of the way it works, if you want to remix an episode of show, is everything's based on Discord right now. So on Discord, you can go in and you choose what characters can be in a scene. And I think it's up to 5 characters now can be in each scene. You pick each character, and the order in which they're in the scene, like that you put them in, is their order of importance in the scene. And then you can decide some actions that are done, like a breakdance battle or a fist fight or whatever. And then you can describe exactly what is happening. And it will generate, and then you decide how long it's going to be. So it'll generate between like a 30-second clip to like a 4-minute clip. And then you can watch that clip and you can go into the script and you can, in theory, rewrite the whole script if you really wanted to. And in the script, you can decide the camera angles, the emotions, who is speaking, and what they are saying. And then it will generate exactly what you've put in that script.
Somebody should mute themselves. Thank you for the question, Adam.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this.
I think it's Jerry needs to.
Yeah, I just muted. No worries. Thank you. That was a good question. And then Michael Ronan, you're playing with Showrunner since the alpha started. I'm wondering from your analytics, who is watching the content? Is it mostly friends of the creators? Is it inside the Discord groups, WhatsApp groups? Is there a curated channel on social for content generated? So a few questions there.
That's a really good idea. So we don't have like a channel yet, just purely to share the content that's generated. But what I have noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed too, on the Discord, everybody's talking to each other. People will comment on each other's different things that they've generated. Sometimes there is a channel actually on the Discord, and sometimes people will send what they made on that channel and people will watch that. What I imagine the future of it is going to be, especially when we're out of alpha and things are like not as locked tight, is that sending things to friends. Like I always have ideas of like when we did have South Park on the platform, of like making a birthday episode for a friend where they're starring in that episode of South Park, and I'm able to send it to them. And I know also for myself, like when I first started using the platform, and even now, is like I will send a clip and I send it to my friends. And one of the biggest things, which is why we like put it in our marketing video, is my friends would call me sometimes and say, "Can I come over and showrunner with you?" And my friends would like come over and we would have a beer and we would sit there and play with showrunner for hours. And so I see a lot of that type of use happening as well, because especially when there's like a group of people, the content gets crazy really, really quickly because everybody's ideas are building off of each other, and then it becomes a super unhinged clip. So I see it being used. It's definitely a very social app. That's like the biggest thing that I've seen it being used. I don't know if it's as much yet, and that's a big yet, it's as much a passive watching app as it is like an interactive and with friends and you're making each other laugh type of app.
That's really helpful. Basha, you have your hands up. Sorry.
Oh, I just put my hand down because I didn't realize that it was supposed to be a social app. And so the first thing I was going to ask is, do you get frustrated with Sora, an app like Sora, sort of overtaking the narrative around AI and like, why this is what we're going to use AI to do, which then sort of says, oh, well, there's nothing really useful in AI filmmaking. And then when you started to talk about all this stuff, I was like, wow, it would be so cool if you could go around to like the unions. And I'm a local 700, I'm assistant editor. And, you know, the narrative in the unions is still very like, this is still very, very taboo. And it's just to replace us. And I am trying to tell people, hey, you're an editor, but I know you want to be a director. And now you can go get together with your friends who are part of your crew and you guys can make something. But I didn't realize it was a social app. And so I was like, oh, could people come on here and like do that and be able to create, you know, a pitch? But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they definitely can. I think that there are a lot of people that are using the app in that way, and it can be used in that way. The question was more so like the analytics of like how I'm seeing it be used, and I'm seeing it be used in a very social, in like a very social way. And what I would also say in like the answer to your other question, it does really frustrate me, especially within AI, of like when a company sort of does something that's almost too bold, that like really gives AI sort of a bad name, because we're all sort of being affected by that. Anyone who works in AI will always be affected by this thing that this other app did, because you're always going to be sort of lumped together. And I know from my experience when I talk about Magnificent Ambersons, how we're hiring massive crews, we're hiring traditional VFX people, traditional animators, actors, like it's being done like an actual, like just a traditional film set. As well as when I explain showrunner, people go, oh, well, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, but it shouldn't take like a 20, 30-minute explanation of like what I do for a living for you to know that I'm like not evil. um, so I mean, it does frustrate me. And then on the flip side, it also frustrates me when filmmakers really don't want to get involved in AI at all. And they don't want to try anything, because my big thing is AI probably won't replace you, but someone who knows how to use AI will definitely replace you. Definitely. And so like, I don't want to see people be replaced. And as I was saying earlier, like a director doesn't want to be in a dark room editing by themselves. They're still going to be hiring all these people, and those people most likely will be using those tools. But if I hired a editor and they showed up with a Steam Bic and a razor cutter and a bunch of film, and we're like, I'm ready to start day one, I'd be like, I'm sorry, you're fired.
Do
We
you
need
think I
someone
should bring a
who-
typewriter to our next meeting, Katya?
Please do. My
Is there any-
keyboard's a typewriter.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I mean, again, that goes to my last question for you is like, I guess, you've been great about dropping jobs opportunities in our jobs channel. I've already seen a few of those. How should people think about working with you? Whether it's the job opportunities are very straightforward, but are there any ways that people should know that there's creative opportunities, or what can we do for you? How is Showrunner trying to grow, and how can Machine Cinema be a part of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for animators and AI animators and editors and sound designers. We're always looking for those, traditional roles, especially right now because we're entering production on so many things. And so we would really, really love to crew up. And then, we're always accepting projects. So if people want to pitch their original show, we're always listening to pitches, and we're always, hearing really great ideas. As I was saying, like we don't want to now be the key holder of the gate. We really do want people to like who don't have major projects behind them, who don't have some massive name, to like have a place that they can pitch and put their shows. So we're always accepting pitches, we're always accepting ideas, and we're also always accepting input, not input, blanking on the word, but ideas about the platform. For example, the reason the script editing feature happened was because I kept complaining that I would have a scene and like a couple of the lines would have been funnier if it was just worded slightly differently. And then 2 months later, we had the script writing function. And so, any little thing that you're like, I love using this platform, I really wish we had this, please tell us. Because that's the whole point of the alpha. We want to know your feedback. We want to make it as amazing as possible.
That's awesome. Maybe a straightforward answer. Masha's asking, how do we pitch? Is it traditional pitch, treatment, pitch deck, or is there anything you would add to that, the frequent, or is there a little submission window or anything?
I'll put my email in the chat right now. Actually, my keyboard just died. And so you can always just send stuff to me. And, but one of the things I always tell people to keep in mind, and what is unique about this platform, is it technically, if nobody, going back a little bit, our creators who, when we put something of theirs on our platform, they get a cut of every time something is generated, they get a cut of that. They get royalties on what they created for as long as it's on the platform. And a lot of the ways I have people think about it is, if nobody watches your show, but it becomes the most generated show on our platform, we will consider that show a massive success. If everybody watches your show and then nobody generates anything from it, we won't consider that a massive success. And so we've made people sort of think about things in a really unique way of not just how is it going to be an interesting story to watch, like why is it interesting to specifically generate?
We're just over time. If anybody has any last questions, jump in. But I appreciate you being patient. I don't know how we would ever do this in an hour. I know that people like hour blocks, but these conversations need to have a little bit of space. And I appreciate you being patient with us, Katya, and being around maybe a little bit longer than you intended. But obviously, we're grateful to have you in the group with us here in LA and in our global conversations. Love seeing the provocations of the Ansashi variety. And it keeps it's interesting. Look, I think some people, the same way we can be critical of, some people are critical. You had some comments about Sora too. I think it's a PR strategy. I think it's staying in the news cycle.
Oh, it definitely is.
So I think I think it might have been obvious some of the choices they've gone back and corrected because it became a moment that we're all talking about it. And I don't know, maybe that's me being cynical of the way the news works, but I just like that there's noise being made that I think gives us opportunities to all even express ourselves and talk about how we would build our businesses. I have one friend who, they're really focused on historical recreation. So when there's a whole bunch of business of how Martin Luther King is being represented in AI, that's an opportunity for them to express, well, that's what they think as a historical recreation business. So anyway, I think everybody needs to recognize their opportunity in these dialogues. To go back to Ziyad's points about, design principles, we're in a state of building this ourselves. I think. And so appreciate seeing what you guys are building too, Katya. Thanks everybody. Min, any final thoughts from you? I'm glad you joined us this week. Any observations?
I'm just sorry, Katya, for canceling our meetings, and I hope we can meet soon.
It's okay. We're literally in production Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. So every time you've canceled, I've been like, hey,
Perfect. Well, all worked out.
Now I'll get to be in Min and Katya's DMs today. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your week. I'll send the recording and write-ups as soon as I can later today.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.